Night on open water. A merchant ship pushes through a high-risk corridor with nothing but dark sea on every side, until the surface starts to move. Small, fast skiffs appear like shadows, multiple contacts spreading wide, cutting angles. The lookout calls it in. The bridge goes quiet for one beat. Then the alarm snaps the crew into motion. A searchlight punches through the darkness, and that's when the warning shots start. Sharp cracks over the wind, a burst of spray, then a hard slap against steel. Rounds strike the outer hull, not to sink the ship, but to send a message. Stop, slow down, and panic. The attackers don't need to win a firefight. They need a pause, just long enough for the swarm to close the last 100 meters. Because in a swarm attack, distance is everything. If the skiffs get close enough, they don't need heavy weapons. They need numbers and timing. One skiff to distract, another to cut the bow, a third to rush the blind side. And if the crew, hesitates, a routine transit can become a hostage headline in minutes. But tonight, the response is immediate and deliberate. In the darkness, a US Navy presence moves like a switch, flipping from silent to overwhelming. Lights, sound, speed, discipline. Not chaos, control. A calibrated show of force designed to do one thing: break coordination, break confidence, and break the geometry of the attack before the attackers ever reach the ship. So here's the real question. How do you stop a group willing to fire into a ship's hull without turning the sea into a shooting gallery? How do you respond fast, stay inside the rules, and still make dozens of attackers decide almost at the same moment that the risk is no longer worth it? Tonight, we're going to decode exactly how it works. Not with guesses, with a clear step-by-step chain: detection, tracking, warnings, disruption, and the moment the swarm collapses. 3 things to watch for as this unfolds. First, how early? Were they spotted? And what confirmed they weren't just fishermen? Second, why can't the Navy simply open fire the instant shots are heard? And third, what single move turns a confident swarm into a full retreat? Because when you see it from the right angle, this isn't just intimidation, it's timing, rules, and geometry, used like weapons. This is warfare decoded. And in the next minutes, we're going inside the incident, from the first contact to the turning point that sends them running. To understand what's happening out there, you have to zoom out first, because this fight is less about firepower and more about positioning. This is a high-risk transit corridor, a narrow slice of ocean where commercial traffic funnels through predictable routes. Container ships, bulk carriers, tankers, massive hulls moving on tight schedules, often unable to make sharp turns and rarely able to stop quickly. In waters like these, predictability becomes a target. On a map, it looks simple: a shipping lane, a risk corridor, and long distances between help and trouble. But in reality, it's a geometry problem. The merchant ship is essentially stuck in a lane. The attackers can choose angles, and the clock starts the moment the first small craft commits to the approach. So, who's involved? First, the merchant ship. It's big, heavy, and built for efficiency, not combat. It can maintain steady speed, but it can't pivot fast. It has blind spots, limited maneuvering options, and a crew whose priority is keeping the ship moving and keeping people alive. Even a small hit to confidence on the bridge, one moment of panic, can trigger a bad decision. Second, the pirate group. This is not one boat charging straight in. This is swarm logic. Multiple skiffs, fast and low to the water, spreading out to force the ship to watch everything at once. One skiff pressures the flank, another threatens the bow, a third hangs back to exploit hesitation. The goal isn't to win a battle in the classic sense. The goal is to close distance, create confusion, and force the ship into a slowdown, a stop, or a turn that exposes a weak side. Third, the U.S. Navy presence. Typically, there's a surface ship in the region and, crucially, aviation overwatch. A helicopter changes the entire equation because it changes what the attackers fear. A ship projects power slowly across water. A helicopter projects power instantly across space. It sees more, arrives faster, and controls the psychological battlefield with light, sound, and presence. Now here's the part most people miss. The Navy can't respond however it wants. It responds under rules of engagement, ROE. ROE is the reason you'll hear warnings before you see decisive action. It's the reason forces verify what they're looking at before they commit. On the open ocean, not every fast boat is hostile. Not every weapon-shaped object is a weapon. And the mission isn't just to win, it's to protect civilians, prevent escalation, and stay proportional. That creates an escalation ladder. The steps are deliberate: identify, communicate, warn, and only then, if the threat continues, disrupt and interdict. You may hear loud hailers, you may see searchlights, flares, and warning shots meant to control behavior without causing unnecessary harm. It's not hesitation. It's controlled decision-making under rules that still allow force, just not reckless force. Which brings us to a quick reality check. Myth: a swarm is unstoppable. That if enough skiffs rush at once, the ship is doomed. Fact: a swarm only works if it can close distance and maintain coordination. A swarm is a timing machine. It relies on clean approach angles, shared confidence, and the belief that the target will freeze. Break the geometry, and you break the swarm. Force them to turn, separate, and hesitate. And suddenly, numbers become noise. They lose the moment they lose coordination. And that's exactly what we're going to track next, using one simple decoded chain. Either detect, track, warn, disrupt, interdict, outcome. Detect is the moment the threat is first noticed, by radar, optics, watchstanders, or air assets. Track is the moment those contacts are confirmed, followed, and categorized. Where they're going, how fast, and on what angles. Warn is the moment communication and visible signals start shaping behavior, before the distance becomes dangerous. Disrupt is the moment the attacker's plan starts to fail. Forced turns, broken spacing, lost timing. Interdict is the moment the Navy applies controlled force or presence to stop the approach and protect the ship. Outcome is the end state: disengagement, retreat, and the corridor opening back up. So as we move into the incident timeline, watch how each link happens in real time. Watch what gets detected first. Watch when tracking becomes certainty. Watch what warnings do to confidence. And watch for the exact instant the swarm stops acting like a swarm, because that is the moment the entire fight flips. The first sign doesn't come from the naked eye. It comes from the pattern. Out on the surface radar, small contacts begin to appear where there shouldn't be any. Fast, low signatures moving with intent. At first, they look like noise. Then they start behaving like a plan. The watch team marks them, updates the track, and hands it to the sensor operators. Electro-optical and infrared cameras swing toward the returns, searching for heat, wake, shape, anything that confirms this isn't routine traffic. And then the sea gives it away. Wake lines cut clean across the water, thin white scars pointing straight toward the ship's projected path. Not one, several. Multiple contacts, running fast, low, and spread wide, splitting into separate groups as they close distance. That split is the tell. Fishing boats don't do that. Normal traffic doesn't do that. A coordinated approach does. This is the moment the timeline starts. T+0, contact. From here on, every minute matters because the geometry is changing. The merchant ship is moving like a freight train. Steady, heavy, committed. The skiffs are moving like blades. They can pivot, they can feint, they can accelerate and change angles faster than the ship can react. And almost immediately, the attackers begin applying pressure in two directions at once. One group drifts toward the ship's flank, riding parallel, testing distance, probing for a blind side. They're not trying to board yet. They're trying to pin attention. If the crew and bridge fixate on that group, the second group gets a cleaner approach. Because the second group is doing something more dangerous. They're cutting the bow. They angle in from ahead, not to collide, but to threaten the ship's path and force the bridge into a decision. Slow down, turn away, or hold course and risk letting the skiffs get closer along a vulnerable line. It's classic two-prong pressure. One hand distracts, the other hand closes. And the most important detail is this. They're not charging in as a single wave. They're timing their movement, matching speed, watching for hesitation. They're looking for the moment the ship stops acting like a ship and starts acting like a target. On the bridge, options are limited. Big ships don't turn quickly. They don't brake quickly. Every maneuver is slow, telegraphed, and expensive. But doing nothing is also a choice, because the attackers are measuring distance, not just speed. They want to get inside that final pocket where their numbers matter most. Now the warnings begin. The first step is communication. Loud hailer calls thrown across the water, clear commands repeated in multiple cycles. Identify yourself. Alter course. Keep your distance. The goal is simple. Change behavior before distance becomes dangerous. But the skiffs keep coming. That's when the escalation ladder starts climbing, one rung at a time. Searchlights lock onto the lead craft, then sweep across the formation. The light isn't just illumination, it's control. It denies anonymity. It tells every attacker, you've been seen, you've been tracked, you're not invisible out here. Then come the flares, bright bursts that hang above the water, turning darkness into daylight for a few seconds at a time. It's a signal and a warning. It also changes the psychology of the attackers. Swarms thrive in shadow. Light exposes spacing, intent, and fear. The next step is the one everyone hears. Warning shots. Not a sustained exchange. Controlled, deliberate shots meant to create splashes on the waterline near the approaching craft. The impact is designed to be unmistakable without being reckless. The message is simple. The ship is not helpless, and the next decision will not be yours alone. But the swarm's lead elements don't immediately break. Instead, they adjust. They spread a little wider. They keep the ship busy. And then, one of them escalates. Burst cracks across the surface, and rounds strike the merchant ship's outer hull. Not to sink it, not to win a firefight, to force a reaction, to inject panic into the decision cycle, to make the bridge hesitate, to make speed drop, to make course change, because that's all the swarm needs. Now the pressure peaks, and the first major decision hits. For the merchant ship, it's a brutal choice. Maintain speed and heading to deny the attackers time, or turn to break their angles and protect a vulnerable side. Staying steady keeps the ship predictable, but speed can keep distance from collapsing. Turning can spoil the bow cut, but it can also expose a flank, create blind spots, and hand the attackers a new approach line. There is no perfect answer, only the least bad one. And for the Navy, the decision is just as critical. Do you hold distance and manage the situation from a safer standoff, continuing warnings, continuing tracking, continuing pressure from range? Or do you commit aviation overwatch as a visible, immediate show of force that can change behavior in seconds? Because once a helicopter enters the picture, the fight shifts from water to air. And here's the mini-hook you need to remember. The real turning point isn't on the bridge. It's in the attackers' heads. The helicopter arrives like a door slamming shut. First you hear it. Low, heavy rotor beats rolling across the sea. Then you see it. An aircraft sweeping in at speed, lights cutting across the water, spotlight locking onto the lead craft like a finger pointing at the guilty. The beam doesn't wander. It holds, it tracks, it follows. It tells the swarm, you are being singled out. Rotor wash hits the surface and throws spray into the air. The skiffs bounce in the turbulence. The water becomes unstable. It's not just noise and wind, it's disruption. A small craft's greatest strength is control at speed. Rotor wash steals that control. And then comes the voice. Commands over a loudspeaker. Firm, repetitive, unmistakable. Alter course. Disengage. Stop your approach. The words don't matter as much as what they represent. Authority, certainty, and immediate consequence if the approach continues. This is what a show of force actually is. Not rage, not chaos, not uncontrolled escalation. It's overwhelming presence applied with discipline. Enough to break confidence, enough to break timing, enough to break coordination. And you can see the effect almost instantly. The swarm begins to drift. A skiff that was cutting the bow suddenly turns away, not because it wants to, but because the angle no longer feels safe. Another skiff that was pinning the flank slows down just enough to avoid the spotlight lock. A third craft starts to peel off to the side, creating a gap where there shouldn't be one. And once you open one gap, a swarm begins to unravel. Because swarms don't win with bravery, they win with synchronization. They need everyone to believe everyone else is committed. The moment one craft hesitates, the risk shifts to the next one. The moment two craft hesitate, the formation becomes a question. The moment three craft hesitate, the swarm starts acting like individuals instead of a unit. Now, here's the twist setup, because the headline number doesn't tell the full story. When people hear 45 pirates, they imagine 45 boats. That's not how it works. 45 is a network. It's a coordinated group, divided into roles. Some are there to close distance. Some are there to distract. Some are there to hang back and read the response. Some are there to exploit any moment the ship slows or turns. It's multiple teams applying timed pressure, an attempt to overload attention and force a mistake. And for a few minutes, it almost works. Because the merchant ship is still constrained, the sea is still open, the skiffs are still fast, and the attackers still believe they can push the situation into panic. But then the show of force does what it's designed to do. It forces a choice. Either disengage now, while distance still exists, or stay committed and risk getting trapped inside a control zone where light, air, and discipline strip away every advantage a skiff has. And this is where the story turns. Because in the next phase, they don't lose because the Navy gets lucky. They lose because they make one mistake. One moment where they linger too long. One moment where spacing collapses. One moment where coordination turns into confusion. And once that happens, the swarm stops being a swarm. It becomes a retreat. And this is where it breaks. Up to this point, the attackers still believe they can force the ship into hesitation. They're still trying to close distance, still trying to hold two angles at once. But the show of force has created something they can't ignore, a control zone. Inside that zone, darkness is gone. Light owns the surface. The helicopter's spotlight doesn't just illuminate, it fixes attention. It locks onto the lead craft, then snaps to the next, then holds again. The rotor wash turns clean water into turbulence, and the warning line, the visible, audible boundary, tells every skiff the same thing. If you cross this line and keep coming, you are choosing the next consequence. This is the mistake. They linger too long inside the Navy's control zone. They don't fully commit, and they don't fully disengage. They hover in the worst possible place, close enough to be threatened, but not close enough to win. And in a swarm, that hesitation is lethal, because a swarm only works when spacing is clean and timing is shared. Watch the spacing. At first, the skiffs are spread like a net. Wide arcs, multiple angles, coordinated pressure. But under light and rotor wash, those arcs start collapsing. One craft turns away early to escape the spotlight. Another slows down just enough to avoid the warning splashes. A third tries to cut the bow again, but the angle is denied, because the ship holds speed, and the helo holds position. The geometry that made the swarm dangerous is now working against it. Here's the geometry. A skiff can threaten a ship when it controls the approach line, when it can stay on an angle that's hard to track, hard to warn, and hard to disrupt. But when the Navy forces the skiffs into repeated turns, the approach lines disappear. The skiffs stop being vectors and start being targets, visible, predictable, separated. This is where it breaks. One spotlight lock turns into a forced turn. One forced turn turns into lost timing. Lost timing turns into separation. And separation turns a swarm into individuals. Now, frame by frame, the collapse is almost mechanical. First, the spotlight pins the lead craft. The pilot holds the beam steady, refusing to let the attackers hide in darkness. Second, rotor wash hits, and the skiff bounces in unstable water. Speed control becomes steering control, and steering control becomes survival. Third, the bow cut is denied. The merchant ship maintains forward momentum, and the helo pressures the approach, so the easy angle simply isn't there anymore. Fourth, the attackers are forced into turns. Wide, obvious turns that cost speed and brake formation. And fifth, they separate. One skiff peels off, then another, and then the whole pattern collapses. Once the first two break away, the rest follow. Not because they suddenly become afraid, but because the math changes. The risk is no longer shared across the group. The risk becomes personal, and that's the moment a swarm loses its strongest weapon, collective confidence. Now the outcome comes fast, and it's decisive. Contacts peel off to the edges. The distance opens back up. The merchant ship continues its transit, still constrained, still cautious, but no longer trapped inside a collapsing circle. The Navy maintains pressure, but it does it with discipline. Tracking, warnings, presence, and control, staying inside ROE while making it unmistakably clear that the approach is over. This is what show of force is supposed to achieve. Not a dramatic firefight, not chaos, a clean end state, disengagement. And there are three tactical lessons here: simple, repeatable, and universal. First, early detection wins half the fight. If you spot the pattern before distance collapses, you buy time. And time is the only thing a swarm can't steal once you have it. Second, an escalation ladder beats panic. Clear steps: identify, warn, disrupt. Turn a messy situation into controlled decision-making. And control is contagious. It spreads from the Navy to the ship, and then it spreads into the attacker's behavior. Third, a show of force breaks coordination. Fast. Light, air presence, and deliberate pressure don't just intimidate. They attack the swarm's structure. They break spacing. They break timing. They break the geometry. And once the geometry breaks, the swarm loses control. Next time, we're going even deeper, because conditions won't be this clean. Heavier seas, night-only contact, a bigger swarm, less time to decide, and more ways for a single mistake to turn into a disaster. If you want the next breakdown, subscribe. This is Warfare Decoded.